They told you that kindness was strength, that being open made you brave, that forgiving everyone, absorbing every insult, and bending yourself into whatever shape others needed, that this was virtue. You believed it. You practiced it. You wore it like a badge. And they used it to destroy you. Not once, repeatedly. And they smiled while they did it. Here is the truth no self-help course will say to your face. You were not kind. You were afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of rejection, afraid of what they would call you if you ever stopped bending. So you gave, and you gave, and you gave, until there was nothing left to take, and they moved on anyway. Machiavelli understood this 500 years before you were born. He wrote in The Prince that men will wound one who is loved sooner than one who is feared, not because love is weak, but because love without power is just exposure. A wound you willingly walk open into the world and wonder why it bleeds.
There are 7 principles in this video. Each one is a door. When you walk through the final one, you will not recognize the person you were before you started watching. If you are fragile, close the video now. Go back to the crowd. But if you are ready to stop being easy to destroy, stay. The myth of the good man. You were brainwashed to believe that goodness is its own reward, that the universe keeps score, that your patience, your loyalty, your willingness to absorb punishment, all of it would eventually be returned to you with interest. Schools taught it. Religion consecrated it. Every story you were raised on ended with the good man winning. But look carefully at those stories. The good man never wins by being good. He wins because at some point he picks up a sword. Society conditioned you to strip that sword from the narrative. It sold you the softness without the spine, the giving without the boundary, the mercy without the consequence. And the reason it sold you this version is simple. A man with no spine is far easier to manage than a man who knows his own worth. Machiavelli saw what the comfortable refused to see. He wrote that a wise man must always follow the paths beaten by great men and imitate those who have been supreme, not the ones who were liked, the ones who ruled. Robert Greene codified this in the 48 Laws of Power. Power requires discipline, and discipline begins with understanding what the world actually is, not what you wished it was. I am going to show you what it actually is. But be warned, what follows will require you to kill a version of yourself you may have mistaken for your best quality. Phase 1. Stop being available to everyone. Availability is not generosity. It is an announcement of desperation. When you answer every message, accept every request, forgive every violation, and make yourself accessible at any hour for anyone who calls, you are not being kind. You are communicating that you have no standards, and a man with no standards has no power. He has only the temporary affection of people who will leave the moment something more valuable becomes available. The average man does not understand this. He believes accessibility signals warmth. What it actually signals is that he fears being forgotten. That fear is the leash, and anyone clever enough to sense it will use it to lead him wherever they need him to go. The psychological principle at work here is intermittent reinforcement. B.F. Skinner demonstrated that variable rewards create stronger behavioral chains than consistent ones. In human terms, scarcity makes you compelling. Presence without limit makes you invisible. The person who shows up only when they choose to, who does not rush to respond, who exists with a cool internal distance, that person holds disproportionate psychological authority over everyone around them. Napoleon understood scarcity as strategy.
He rationed his presence deliberately. Even among his generals, access to him was treated as privilege. Those who earned it valued it. Those who had it constantly stopped respecting it. The practical instruction is this: choose one relationship in your life where your availability has been weaponized against you. You know which one. Go quiet. Not dramatically, not with announcement. Simply become less present. Let them feel what it is to wonder. You will notice the shift in power before the week is over. Now ask yourself, how many of the people who drain you would still call if you had nothing left to give? Phase 2. Use silence as architecture. The world belongs to those who speak least and move first. Most men talk to feel powerful. They fill silence with opinion, explanation, and noise because silence feels like emptiness to them. It is not. Silence is a room with no exits. When you sit in it without flinching, the person across from you will give you everything you need to know about who they are. The average person cannot tolerate silence. They rush to fill it. They reveal their anxiety, their agenda, their weakness, all to escape the discomfort of a pause. You must learn to welcome what they fear. Joe Navarro, former FBI behavioral analyst and foremost expert on nonverbal communication, documented this in clinical detail. The body fills silence. When someone is composing a lie, managing insecurity, or concealing intent, silence forces the tell. The hands move, the eyes shift, the breath changes pace. The person who can sit still does not just appear more powerful, they are gathering intelligence in real time. Cosimo de' Medici built the most dominant banking dynasty in Renaissance Europe and said almost nothing in public. His silence was legendary. Men feared what he might know, not what he said, because what he said was always measured. The rumor was always larger than the statement. That gap between what he might know and what he chose to reveal was the actual source of his power. Practical instruction. The next time someone challenges you, insults you, or tries to provoke a reaction, say nothing. Hold the pause for 5 full seconds. Keep your eyes level. Do not blink first. Let them live in the discomfort they created. You will not need to win the argument. The silence already won it. The one who talks first after confrontation is the one who needed resolution more. Needing resolution more means losing control. Phase 3. Eliminate the need for closure. Closure is a story the weak tell themselves to feel clean about walking away. You have wasted years waiting for people to apologize, explain, or acknowledge what they did to you. You crafted conversations in your head. You left the door slightly open just in case they came back with the admission you needed to move on. They never came. The reason is simple. Closure is something you give yourself. It is never handed to you by the person who harmed you. To wait for it is to give the person who already betrayed you a second, extended window of control over your internal state. This is attachment theory applied to power. Psychologist John Bowlby established that anxious attachment, the pattern of seeking constant reassurance from those who have already demonstrated they cannot provide it, creates a loop of reinforced suffering.
The brain returns to the wound because it was never allowed to properly close the file. You must close the file yourself, deliberately, permanently. Galileo was placed under house arrest by the Inquisition, stripped of his work, forced to recant truths he knew were truths. He never received an apology. He never received public vindication in his lifetime. But he did not wait for it. He continued his work in private, in exile, in silence, and his ideas outlasted every institution that tried to silence him.
He did not need their closure. He needed only his own clarity. Practical instruction. Write down the name of the person or situation from which you are still waiting for acknowledgement. Look at it. Then write one sentence beneath it. I no longer require anything from this. Put it away. Do not return to it. The file is closed. The next wound will not take root the same way. Because the wound only festers when you keep returning to it for something that will never come. Phase 4. Build the reputation before the room knows your name. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. How you are thought of before you arrive is more powerful than anything you could say once you get there. Most men invest in what they can accomplish. The ruthless invest first in how they are perceived, not through performance or posturing, through consistency, deliberate restraint, and the architecture of scarcity. The framework here is signaling theory.
Economists Spence and Stiglitz demonstrated that in environments of incomplete information, which is every human environment, reputation functions as the primary currency of trust and fear. You do not need to be the most skilled person in the room. You need to be the person whose reputation precedes them with sufficient weight that others adjust their behavior before you open your mouth. Robert Greene documented this through the life of Cesare Borgia in the 33 Strategies of War. Borgia did not build power through force alone. He built it through managed perception. He made himself unknowable enough that his enemies could not coordinate against him. He acted decisively when necessary and disappeared into silence when it was not. The not knowing was the weapon. Practical instruction. Stop announcing your plans. Stop sharing your ambitions with people who have not earned the right to witness your process. Build in the dark. The announcement is always weaker than the arrival. Comment below. I build in silence. Phase 5. Make your standards the price of entry. A man without standards is not a man. He is a service. And everyone, consciously or not, treats him accordingly. The world will not respect a standard you have never enforced. Saying you have limits is worthless theater. What matters is what happens when someone crosses one. The response to violation is the actual standard. Everything before it is just talk. Dr. Henry Cloud, psychologist and author of the Foundational Clinical Framework on Relational Limits, established that the only way to create change in a relationship is to alter the consequences of behavior. People do not change when you explain how their actions hurt you. People change when the behavior produces an outcome they do not want. Your words are not the consequence. Your distance is. Julius Caesar understood this. When he crossed the Rubicon, there were no more negotiations, no further explanations. The crossing was the message. The withdrawal of access, the elimination of compromise, that was the declaration. And Rome never misread it. Practical instruction. Identify one behavior you have tolerated repeatedly that you would not accept from a stranger. Now enforce the consequence, not with fury, with calm, with finality, with the absolute internal certainty that you are worth defending. The ones who respect you will adjust. The ones who do not were never there for you. They were there for what they could extract. Phase 6. Shed the people you outgrow. There is no cruelty in evolution. There is only honesty. The people you needed at 20 may not belong in the architecture of who you are at 30. The ones who were right for a chapter of suffering may have no role in the chapter of strength. And to keep them past their purpose, out of guilt, out of loyalty to a version of yourself that no longer exists, is to pour concrete into your own foundation.
The average man keeps connections he has outgrown because change feels like betrayal. He confuses loyalty to people with loyalty to growth. These are not the same. Often, they are opposites. The psychological concept is homeostasis in social systems. Researcher Murray Bowen's family systems theory demonstrated that every social group creates invisible pressure to maintain its current equilibrium. When one member begins to evolve, to earn more, think more clearly, demand more, the system resists. The resistance comes through subtle undermining, humor at your expense, the slow withdrawal of support. The group does not want you to change because your change exposes their stasis. The Spartans cut this with ruthless efficiency. The agoge, their training system, was designed explicitly to dissolve the ordinary social bonds that would slow a warrior down. Not from cruelty, from clarity. A man who fights for approval fights for the wrong thing. A man who fights for his own standard fights for everything. Practical instruction. Look at the 5 people you spend the most time with. Ask honestly, do these people challenge me to be more, or do they need me to be less? The answer tells you everything about where you are going and who is slowing you down. Phase 7. Become the standard by which others measure themselves. This is the final evolution. This is where power becomes effortless. When you have mastered availability, silence, detachment from closure, reputation, standards, and the ruthlessness of selective loyalty, what remains is a version of yourself that others cannot manipulate. Not because you are cold, because you are complete. Completeness is the real threat. The manipulator has no tools against a man who wants nothing from him. The flatterer has no leverage over a man who does not need to be praised. The betrayer cannot wound a man who already expected impermanence. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The fool waits for pain to teach him the world is not safe. The wise man builds himself as though he already knows, not from bitterness, from clarity. The historical figure who best embodied this was Machiavelli himself. He wrote The Prince after being imprisoned, tortured, and exiled from Florence, stripped of everything: power, position, relevance. He wrote in exile, in disgrace, with nothing left to protect except the accuracy of what he saw. 500 years later, his name is still the standard by which power is analyzed. He did not wait for the world to vindicate him. He wrote the vindication and let history deliver it. The dark mirror. This path is cold. That is not a warning. It is the description of the territory. The wolf does not apologize for what it is. The sheep resents it for that exact reason. The man who builds himself this way will lose people along the road, not because he became worse, but because they required him to stay small. His growth was the offense. There will be seasons of radical isolation, silences that do not end, moments when you question whether the cost of sovereignty is too high, whether warmth is worth more than freedom, whether being understood matters more than being unbreakable. In those moments, remember this. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in a farmhouse outside Florence, his hands still marked from the ropes of his interrogation. He had every reason to become bitter and small. He chose instead to write the most precise document on power the world had ever seen. He did not need rescue. He built from what remained. This freedom is cold, but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. No one gave it to you. No one can take it.
It is earned through every boundary enforced, every silence held, every departure made without explanation, every wound converted into fuel.
The closing. You made it here. That alone separates you from the majority who needed the comfort of the crowd more than the truth of this room. You have the blueprint. The 7 phases are not theory. They are architecture. Availability becomes scarcity. Scarcity creates silence. Silence becomes unreadability. Unreadability becomes the fear in those who need to control you. And that fear becomes the distance that finally lets you breathe. This is not about becoming heartless. It is about becoming precise, surgical, knowing exactly where your energy belongs and protecting it with the same intensity you once gave to people who never deserved it. The world will try to break you. Let it try. You are no longer the version that absorbs everything and says nothing. You are the version that moves with intention, removes without apology, and builds without permission. Subscribe not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being the person other people practice on. And for those who want what cannot be said in a public format, the strategy beneath the strategy, that content exists for those willing to go further. The door is open. Whether you walk through it is, as always, your decision. You are the architect now.